So, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can, Professor.
Very good. I am Patrick Ndavi from the University of Nairobi, from the Africa Coordinating Center for the Abandonment of Female Genital Mutilation. I am the current coordinator. This center is domiciled in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. I am an obstetrician gynecologist. I'm not a gender expert. I'm a medical doctor. But what brings us today is a cross-cutting issue. Even in our practice, it's a cross-cutting issue. The issue of, and I like the new term, I've never heard of it, positive masculinity. Yes, so this is something new. I didn't join you last week, so I don't know whether I am the right person to kickstart this conversation. I'm not quite sure that I'm the right person to kickstart this conversation because this is part 2. I have looked around to understand what is expected of me. I'm hoping I will be able to contribute to this conversation. I would wish that someone else kickstarts those who have been on this call and on this journey before myself.
All right.
I wish.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor. Brief introduction. You're not a gender expert, but you are a medical. But the issue that brings us here tonight is cross-cutting. So welcome. It's wonderful to have you. I'm going to pass the baton to Dr. Chesang to briefly tell us who she is, to also clarify whether she's a gender expert or a medic.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
And hi to every other person whose place is not evening. I'm Jacqueline Chesang, as I've been introduced. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist and also a public health specialist. I think Professor Davia has made all the disclaimers, but and I'm glad to hear him say that. He used to be my teacher, so it's good for him to say, well, for once, I don't know. It feels good. So, but otherwise, of course, we've been working in the to change gender norms and all that. So I'm glad to be here. And let's see what happens. Thanks.
Right, thank you so much, Dr. Chesang. Welcome on board. I'm going to pass the baton to Mustafa. Kindly introduce yourself, and if you can, leave your cameras open, especially for the panelists, for recording purposes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for having me once more. My name is Mustafa Dumbuya. I will join Prof to make a disclaimer that I'm also not a gender expert. I am a journalist, so my background is in media and journalism, but also my work has been intersecting quite a lot with human rights. So my journalism always sits in the intersection between media, journalism, and human rights. Right? And gender issues are human rights issues. So I work with an organization called Journalists for Human Rights, which is an international media development organization based in Canada, but we do have an African office based here in Nairobi, Kenya. What we do primarily is that we enhance the skills of journalists. We strengthen journalists to report on human rights issues with an ethical and professional lens. And we do run a project here in Kenya that is called the Voice for Women and Girls' Rights. So essentially, that's a gender-focused project that we bring together different stakeholders in media, in civil society, in government to advance to amplify women's voices and advance their rights. I'm from Sierra Leone, but I live and work here in Kenya. And once more, it's a pleasure to be here and looking forward to these conversations, to learn, to share as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. Again, we've had a disclaimer, journalist. We're going to keep that in mind. I'm going to pass the baton to Alpha. Alpha, welcome. Introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, good evening, and thank you. Of course, I'm Alpha B.Y. Kamara. I am, and of course, I'm an anti-AGM campaigner. Of course, I've been working as a campaigner for the past 10 to 15 years. And of course, I will not disclaim, but I am working on gender-related issues because you cannot campaign against the practice of FGM if you don't have interest in campaigning on gender and gender-related issues. So I am a Sierra Leonean, and of course, I work for one of the leading organizations in the campaign against FGM in Sierra Leone. And of course, I am one of the forefront liners in breaking the silence in the practice against FGM at a time when society frowned against anyone that talked about the practice publicly. I have been like that individual who went in remote community, talked about the practice and how we can break the silence. So in a nutshell, I work for AIM Sierra Leone, that is the lead organization in the campaign against FGM, and it's the chair of a consortium of 26 other NGOs working in the campaign against FGM. So it's a pleasure meeting my colleague Sierra Leonean, that is Mustafa Dumbuya. My brother, good afternoon, good evening.
All right.
Great to meet you here, Alpha, and looking forward to exchanging ideas and thoughts here.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to our panelists for that wonderful introduction and disclaimers that you've given, which we've considered in the preparation of this webinar. And without further ado, we're just going to get straight into the conversation right here. And I know Dr. Chesang was here last week with us, and she did contribute to the last week's webinar. And I'm going to start it off with her. In the conversation where we have gender equality and human rights universally, we're talking about, mostly we've engaged women, especially when it comes to gender equality. But for us to change narratives, we have to teach young boys and men and shift attitudes. So how can we effectively engage men and boys as allies in dismantling norms that perpetuate violence, one which is a violation to human rights? How do we effectively do so? Dr. Chesang, the floor is yours. Welcome.
First, I need to acknowledge that addressing social and gender norms can be challenging. And for people in the field, they'll confess to this, that it really takes a bit of time, and at times you feel like you're not making any progress at all. And when you're addressing social and gender norms, you need a whole community approach. You cannot just target one party. You cannot just target the people who are directly affected. Everybody's affected by it. The women and girls are directly affected. So men and boys would really be useful in that aspect. And first, those norms influence men and boys' perspectives and positions on gender-based violence. So it directly affects them. And this and harmful norms would contribute to gender inequalities and violence, and also promote the male control of girls. And these inequities, of course, they extend beyond the individual to the community, families, including policies, formulation, and decision-making. And also, we need to appreciate the fact that GBV, of course, there are many other drivers of GBV, but one of them would be patriarchy. And the fact that men would feel like controlling women's lives. So the inclusion of men and boys as change agents can help a program address power dynamics and help change harmful social and gender norms in a sustainable way. So first, I would like to explain why I think they should be engaged. One of the reasons is that they might be the perpetrators of GBV themselves. So there is no way you can leave them out in the process. And in many communities, especially if you're talking about Africa, they are the main decision makers. And they're also part of society, so they can not be left out. And they can help communicate positive change and influence change in other people. And if you choose not to consider men, what would happen is that they can act as barriers to change. There are places where we have practical examples where economic empowerment of women has been done and men have been left out, and they fought back, and the programmers have had to create empowerment for men and boys specific to them. Male involvement helps build trust between men, women, and other stakeholders, because if stakeholders come and only talk to women, they might feel like you're being an insider. And it also ensures social cohesion. Remember, we always try to do no harm at the end of the day. So, and it also ensures sharing of experiences and values by focusing on what brings people together rather than what pulls them apart. Men can be brought in to act as allies by actively advocating against GBV and harmful norms in their communities. And they can also act as role models and advocates for ending GBV, especially if they hold positions of power in the community. And they can become agents of change by sharing their stories of standing up to their families, communities, and societies. And their voices can eventually translate into action by influencing other men and boys. But just to, there's something I would like us to note, that we need to involve all community members, because if you involve men only, it could actually reinforce the power positions between men and women. So you need to avoid reinforcing the traditional power dynamics. Back to you. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chesang. Two interesting things that you've mentioned that have caught my attention is the aspect of power dynamics, and we need to look at how we reinforce and how we look at it, bringing me to the next question, which I'm definitely going to give Professor Ndavi. I've seen him nodding a couple of times. In what ways do you think we can leverage the different power dynamics between men and women to harness and create a more equitable society that promotes universal human rights? How can we leverage from that power difference that is there, rather than having us fight, but just work together? Prof.
Thank you. I didn't get your name. I like to call people by their names. It's a dignified way,
I'm sorry for that. I'm Lynn Obuoge. I am the communications man and FGM.
In Kenya?
Yes, in Kenya.
Lynn.
Yes.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. Sorry for that. Now, so we're looking at power dynamics, yes, and how differential these dynamics between men and women may be harnessed. So first of all, what are these power dynamics? And you look at issues of formal authority, that power that emanates from holding an official position in an office, a professor, dealing with the students. Yes, there comes in power dynamics. Vice chancellors. Let me use the environment of being in for the last over 40 years. Yes, chairman of departments. That position they hold does provide them with that power. And the power, if not used well, can be harmful, not only to those who are younger, those who are, if you want, who work under them, but even to themselves at the end of the day. So there is the issue of formal authority. There is the issue of charisma. When we look at personal characteristics, yes, you know, charisma, persuasiveness, interpersonal connections, charm, that can either motivate others to follow suit. If, for example, you have a village elder who is extremely charismatic and is a champion, yes, to promote gender equality, to promote the enjoyment of human rights. And it's a village elder. You can imagine what it will do to the boys. They will follow suit. They will be change agents because he's an influencer. He's a decision maker. Can you imagine? A village elder. And this has been the stories we are getting from other continents, other countries, where you even go to a village elder as a power broker, if you want to use that word. So yes, and so that is charisma. And then there is the issue of expert power. You are skilled, you are competent. That is part of the main three key power dynamics that we need to consider. But there are others. For example, coercive power. Yes, we are told back in 1948, during the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's the right of everyone to enjoy certain things, devoid of coercion, intimidation. So coercive power needs to be brought in. Informational power. Do we have all this information that is awash, but to only those perhaps who are literate, who are tech savvy, they can access? What about in the communities where you find most of our people perhaps may not be literate? It may be written in a language people do not understand, English, French, here in Kenya, Swahili. What if you are dealing with someone, you're talking about gender-based violence, say in Western Kenya, where the Nilotes, when you talk about Swahili, it's another story. That information will not be carried in a language, and for the journalists, may not be carried in a language they understand. So again, those are forms of power dynamics we need to consider. And it's good that we have our experts in journalism and the media So when we consider those, then we ask, so what should we do? If we want to harness all these dynamics, first, that from my little understanding, is to understand the context and power dynamics in the local community. It requires us to conduct analysis. It means we need evidence to understand the power dynamics. Who calls the shots? Who is the power broker? Who is the influencer? Who do people listen to? Yes, who do they listen to? Whose opinion matters to each person? Who are those? It means it is not just going to be women. It is going to be all of us. And I like what Jacqueline has said. It requires everyone in the community. And so for those who are practitioners of, if you allow me to say so, of positive masculinity, do we have the data? Have we undertaken research? Where? In the communities. Have we? So that we understand how, for example, different forms of violence against women and girls manifest. Do we have that data? It is, and for this, as I say, it should include everyone. What else is possible that we can use to harness once we have this data? Converting male decision makers into champions for women. But then we need to have evidence of strategies for harnessing male decision makers into championing issues related to women's, to gender equality and human rights. But when we say so, we shouldn't imagine it is only women and girls we should consider. We should consider men and the boys as also requiring to enjoy gender equality and human rights. We shouldn't always imagine it's only we think about women and girls. No, no, no. It means all of us. So how, therefore, what are strategies that we can use to, therefore, convert male decision makers into champions for women? For example, in some countries, what they have done is starting from the home, from the household, starting not just from, in fact, I usually like to say, if you allow me, Lynn, I teach human sexuality. When I'm teaching obstetrics and gynae, sexual and reproductive health. I want to go back to the bedroom. There, for those who are partners at that level, how do we harness that space to begin conversations between partners? We want a situation where there is equality at that level. If a decision on when to start having children, when to have children, how frequent to have children, when to have children and when to stop. We have not even come to the household where there are boys and girls. We are talking about two people who matter in that decision. So that at that level, both the men and the women feel empowered. They have confidence. You know, look at their agency. Yes, I know when I am with my partner, I can broach some of these subjects and it will not result in violence. Remember? Yes. We need to go there. Then we move to the household now in the family. How do you want to bring the boys and the girls together? How do you want the boys to know their role? And that being open, expressing one's emotions openly, saying what seems to occupy their minds openly is not a feature of weakness, but a strength of a man or of a boy. I am scared. I am not sure. We're beginning to, shall we say, create awareness among the young boys about this concept that I read called positive masculinity. Remember, we are told boys don't cry. Is that true? Is that what we want? Now we are at the household level. We have left in the bedroom. We are at the household level. Where those children are brought up. Do we want to be there? And in schools, where our boys and girls are, what should inform the content of the curriculum that these boys and girls are exposed to by the teachers? Meaning even the teachers need to be with us. Yes, because they are the ones with the boys and girls, I don't know for how many hours in a day. For us in Kenya, 5 days. I'm talking about primary school, by the way. You may tell Nabi, no, let's go back to kindergarten. Okay, fine. We needed to start managing the emotions, the anxieties of the young ones. They are probably 4 years. They come home crying. So and so didn't play with me. So and so looked at me. But that kind of thing. That is where they are at. How can we use that so that we begin sowing the seed of positive masculinity, not negative masculinity. At that level, so I'm saying which sector? So the education sector, which can play a very good role in, promoting positive masculinity from very young ages. But then those who are the opinion leaders, those are the power brokers in the education sector, the teachers, we need to make sure, and I'm hoping that those who are into this, you have programs targeting our educationists. I'm an educationist myself, but at the university level. I'm talking this, I'm wondering when we were with the Dr. Chesang, Jacqueline, whether I brought this out. It's something, as she said, yes, I say, I don't know. So that's one of those. So therefore, creating and converting men who are decision makers, power brokers, influencers, allies to champion for women. But we must also, we are saying for all of us, because we cannot be left out. And finally, we look at the facilitating dialogue with the men at every level. In our work within ACAF, we have had the dialogues with the men in Narok. We sit with the men, Dr. Jacqueline Chesang will go and sit with the women, and they will talk about female genital mutilation, and the men will share their views about this. Now, those are other spaces that can be used so that when we create these spaces where men can express themselves, where men can reflect on these issues, it would be very useful. It has been done in places where you find even some village elders work with their wives, their own wives, as examples. And they work with their wives in a way to create awareness about, yes, men can and will support women for women to enjoy their rights as human beings. And we don't want to go to the story from 1948 up to today where we are, no, but we know what has happened on this issue. And it's a movement. I look at it as a movement from 1948. When you look at the United Nations, all the NGOs, international NGOs, local NGOs, and local NGOs in Kenya, in Sierra Leone, in Africa, need to take this up. This question of harnessing positive masculinity to engender equality and human rights. Please, Lynn, our lectures are usually 1 hour. Let me stop.
Thank you so much, Professor Ndavi. Very informative.
I hope I'm not confused.
No, absolutely on point, on spot. That was absolutely brilliant. I know most of us have taken our notes out and our pens out just to take that information down. Thank you so much. And you mentioned very interesting things right there, starting with informational power. How do we sow the seed of positive masculinity in young boys? How do we incorporate this in educational systems? And I think that brings me to the next question, which I'm going to probably give to Alpha, who is engaging, or rather has engaged people in communities for 15 years now, even when these conversations about FGM, especially in Sierra Leone, were not as rampant as maybe now. And I'm going to just throw it to you. What do you think are the strategies, given what Professor Ndavi has said, can schools, communities adopt to ensure that there's comprehensive knowledge sharing in terms of gender equality, such that we can foster a culture of equality within our communities, which in turn promote universal human rights, especially for women and girls? What do you think, Alpha? What strategies can we employ?
Thank you very much. Are you getting me clear?
Yes, you are very clear.
Out of experience working with schools and communities, one of the strategies we can employ so that we can ensure we have gender equality both in schools and communities. I want to draw reference from my professor, what he said: conversation between the spouses. And for us, we have what we call positive parenting. Positive parenting has a crucial role to play in ensuring gender equality, because we all need to know that the first teacher of a child is the parents. And whatever education is given to the child at that tender age has a long way to influence the behavior of that child. Um, we are living in a society wherein most parents don't have that kind of positive parenting skills they need to instill into their children. Um, if we are having a home where the husband, on occasional basis, treats the wife in front of the children, reprimanding the wife in front of the children, beating the wife, using offensive language on the mother of the children in the presence of the children, what will the children learn? So for us as an organization and as a society, one good approach that we think can help to foster equality, it needs to start at home. One, it has to do with positive parenting. We have to engage the parents, because one thing we need to understand today, a child must have somebody to imitate, somebody to mentor a child at home. Positive mentoring. It could be the mother, it could be the father. But if a home lacks an individual whom the children can imitate from, this will be a recipe to perpetrate more violence. Now, we have what we institute in this approach. One, it has to do with honesty and transparency. As a parent, it is your responsibility to tell your children about your expectation, what you expect your children to be in community, because you need to know that your children are your replica. Your children represent you. Your children portray the image. So we are therefore asking or imploring for us to adapt this thing we call positive parenting, because a parent needs to have an ample time with their children. Because the more valuable time you spend with your children, the more children can be open. Openness, like what my professor said, conversation amongst the spouse. Not only when you need intimacy between husband and wife, that is where you see lots of lobbying, lots of conversation, love quotations, love messages. But the positive parenting starts between the husband and wife, because you are there to mentor your children. The communication, your attitude, your actions between yourself has a portrait to your children. So we are therefore asking that a positive parenting is that kind of skill wherein you start to nurture your children in a non-violent way. Because caring for your children don't only limit you to buying gifts, buying clothing, giving them food, sending them to school, but nurturing them to become non-violent has a very great impact in the lives of these children, because these children need to be nurtured in such a way that they will become responsible adults. Children that you have, you have this thing we call mentor your children, prepare your children the way you want them to grow. So we are therefore saying mentor your children, nurture your children so that they can become responsible adults that can see that violence is not part of my family. If we are able to do this, this will be a very good approach. The other thing I think can help in bridging this issue of gender inequality has to do with support to women. For lots of organizations that are women-focused or women-led organization, hardly get the kind of support as compared to the male organizations. An example in my society, in my country, we have this thing, organization we call Center for Coordinating Youth Activities. They are almost like getting funds, getting support from central government. As we have other organizations that are women-led, because the more you start to marginalize the women's group, the women's association, and concentrate into the men, the association of the men, the organizations of the men, the more you think women are left behind. So how will you bridge that kind of gap? So another positive approach will be like given support, economic support that can empower women, because we all know we have different forms of violence. And one common violence the women go through today has to do with economic violence. Because a society where women absolutely don't have source of income, women don't have where they can have their income, they're 100% dependent on their male counterparts. What will happen? There is this kind of tendency amongst the men that if I ask you for something as a wife or as a fiancé or as a partner, and you cannot provide it for me, what will I do? I will use my economic strength as a man to take a decision. Even in terms of marital, when you want to have sex with your partner, the wife, maybe due to the domestic work of the wife, at night, the wife will feel tired. If the wife say, I am tired, don't use that as an excuse to pounce on that woman. So we have to provide equal support to both male and women-led organizations, as this will help to bridge the issue of gender inequality at society level. When we talk about schools, of course, teachers, when you have a kid as a parent, whatever the kid learned from the teacher, whatever instruction given by the teacher to a kid, that kid will take that into cognizance. That kid will take it into high esteem. By that, if a teacher say 1 + 1 = 4, that concept will stick on the child's mind. And when the child go home and said 1 + 1 = 2, and you, the parent, say, hey, Junior, this is not the right answer. 1 + 1 = 2. What the child will say, Mom or Dad, are you saying you are more sensible than my teacher? This thing will come up. So therefore, the approach we use, or that I'm imploring us all to use, is to see how we can have an engagement of male and female pupils or students in school. For us, I am talking out of experience on the approaches we use. We establish what we call, at community level, we have what we call husbands and fathers and mothers group. What is the essence? We want to ensure if we have 10 male, we have another 10 female, we bring them together to do whatever discussion wants to do. And we give equal responsibility roles to be played by these individuals. Because the more you involve men in the fold of women, the more you involve the women in the midst of the men, so they will become self-sufficient. They will realize that we are equally important at community level. In decision making, we are quite important. So the issue of positive masculinity is like how we can bring positive gender equality education both in schools and at community level. Because, like I said earlier, when you have a parent or a household where children are educated on their roles and responsibility. For instance, there are certain homes where you hardly see a male child go to the kitchen, clean plates, wash plates, or clean the household. It is us as parents to give the equal responsibility between the girl child and that of the male child, so that the girl child will not only realize that the house chores is for me as a girl, but the girl will realize that the house chores I have done today can be equally done tomorrow by my brother. This will create gender equality. We have a scenario in my society because the boy child is grown to such a way that they are not allowed to participate in domestic or house chores. When they fully grow, they hardly help their wives at home. They don't help even in terms of domestic work. And there is this concept in our society when a husband is having a clash with the wife, and the wife happens to go to her family. When the house remains dirty, unkept, what people will say, it is indeed a woman that has a home. It is indeed because men are not grown to become responsible, are not grown to such a way that they know that domestic work can be a role between the man and the woman. So making the stereotype clear, educate these people at family level to realize this will help to reduce the issue of gender inequality at society level. So the first thing, it has to do with positive parenting. When we have positive parenting, we are sure of having positive kids, positive adults at community and at school level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alpha. Quite informative right there, knowing the kind of strategies you're employing for comprehensive gender equality education in Sierra Leone, one of them being positive parenting, which is very interesting. The kids need a mentor. If we need to sow this seed of positive masculinity, there has to be a mentor, bringing me to one of the places, or rather media, which is a very powerful tool. There's alternative media nowadays, and I'd just love to invite Mustafa for this particular question. When it comes to media, media can help shape perceptions, media can help shape narratives, media helps shape mindsets. For us to sow this positive masculinity, how can media influence public attitudes to encourage positive behaviors among men and boys? Before I even get into alternative media as the technology, let's just get into that first. How can media be used to just channel positive attitudes towards men and boys? Thank you, Mustafa. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Once more, quite a lot of passion coming from my co-panelists, and you can tell how much the work they've also done in shaping and ensuring that we have an equal society. The media plays quite an important role, as you've mentioned, in shaping public opinions, and also just helping us understand the world and understand the issues that shape our communities on a day-to-day basis. And when it comes, sadly, the media could, while it could play an important role in helping to create a more equal society, the media could also, unfortunately, if not used properly, reinforce or perpetuate stereotypes, right? And often, most of the challenges we still face today in the fight to achieve gender equality is actually stereotypes, right? And these stereotypes come from a system which is patriarchal, and we've lived on a Prof, when he spoke earlier, mentioned about the different power dynamics. And those power dynamics also sit within a patriarchal system where we've gotten men over centuries, men have gotten more powers, men make the decisions. And when you have power, often it's not easy to let go of that power. And often, if you're not approached right, you tend to fight back whenever someone tries to engage you to reflect on those powers and those privileges that you've enjoyed. So, and you also have to understand that the media is not from another continent or another space. The people who practice in the media, and when I say media here, I speak in its broadest sense, traditional media, social media, because today you have bloggers, and honestly, they have more followers in most cases than what we know as media. So I'm not leaving them out in my categorization of media. It's inclusive of all sort of media. The practitioners in this media space are also a product of the society. So whatever they've learned from the society, whatever they've gotten from the society is what they give back, right? So often you find a post online or a publication online, or a publication from a newspaper or broadcast from TV or radio that you look back to and said, well, this is quite stereotypical, right? Reflecting or portraying women in a certain light or shape, or things just like when there are, always going to women when they are victims of something, or not speaking to women when they get to do, when a woman achieve or accomplish something, or when you need an expert, in climate, or an expert in economics, your first thought would be you want to go speak to a man, because stereotypically we've been conditioned to think that men play certain role, even in academia, and women play certain role. When we want to look for gender experts, the first thought that we think about would be, oh, let's look for a woman because, gender issues are women issues, right? Unfortunately. So we tend to reduce issues to these binaries, of men do this and women do that. So what we should be working towards is actually questioning that system, and questioning the system. Why do we continue to have these different structures of, men should play certain role, women should play certain roles, and that's thought, because it's important for us to always go back there, because that thought continue to shape the way we act, the way we approach issues. That's why when you call for training or an event that calls, when you put the word gender there, you find a lot of men probably will shy away from showing up in those activities. Or when you are in school, even today, when they are teaching, it's called home management or home economics. We used to call it home economics classes. I remember those classes were filled with female students, not male students, because they still believe, because there are still beliefs that, well, if home management, I'm not going to manage your home, it's homes will be managed by girls, by ladies, by women. So we need to, and I think my co-panelists have, spoken already very much eloquently about and why it's important to question, to interrogate those systems and what needs to be done to actually also reform those systems. But when it comes to the media, it's very important for the media not to repeat or perpetuate those stereotypes, those roles, because the media does play a really important role. Journalists or media practitioners are expected to be well-read, are expected to be, what's the word? They're expected to be much more people who are progressive, right? So if you are a journalist, if you are media practitioners, the bar should be a bit quite higher, because you do have a role to shape public opinions, to educate people. That's what we usually say, to inform, not just to inform people, but to educate people and help them make informed choices in the day-to-day issues or matters that impact their lives. So the media does have an important role. That's why the Journalists for Human Rights, where I work, we work with journalists a lot. And the reason for that is that because we believe that journalists are thought leaders. They are opinion shapers. And if the journalists don't get it right, probably the hundreds or thousands of audience of people who follow their content will definitely also not get it. So that's why some of the engagement we usually get with journalists are things like, on gender sensitivities reporting, helping journalists to understand the different dynamics that shape the gender discourse, and shifting the assumptions that gender only mean women, right? That gender actually encompasses everybody, right? And so we try to get journalists to understand this different concepts and understand why how those concepts could be integrated in their day-to-day reporting, in their day-to-day journalism. And to say that when you are talking about the economy, it's important to reflect and see how the economic troubles impact different members of the society differently, right? And if our journalist understands that, then it enhances their reporting to be more inclusive and representational of the realities of the day-to-day realities of the people that they are speaking to. So we do work with journalists on those different, to help them understand the concept of human rights, the concept of gender, and also demystify or challenge those myths about gender, about what it actually means, to actually help them get a much more comprehensive and rounded idea about what gender actually means. So I will leave it there for now, but it's important for us to understand that all what we've been speaking about sits within a system that we have to first of all confront, and that is patriarchy, and that's a system that gives men power over women. And once we understand that system, and once we are able to break that system down, we are then able to unpack the different issues that we need to address. We will then understand, for instance, that in order for us to get men involved in championing women's issues or the human rights of women, what is the incentive for men? Because remember, it's power. I do have power, and you're asking me to share those powers. What is in it for me? Right? So what is in it for these men? So for practitioners as well in the field, like Alpha and others who are speaking to men, it's always about, how do you shape I'm a journalist, I will use terms because normally we have to pitch to editors. How do you sell this notion, this idea to men that it is in your own interest, right? It is in your own interest to support these values, to support these ideals. How do you pitch that? How do you sell that? I think I will leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mustafa. I'm going to be coming back to you in a few because we might need to discuss alternative media, which in other terms could be called social media for young people as technology, and how they can use this to ensure that they're not perpetuating the wrong thing, and how we can train them, and whether it's a consideration to have this conversation with those who access social media such that they post what is right and what just looks right. Anyway, thank you so much. I would love to get back to those who are listening to us, every dear listener on this particular webinar, that please feel free to drop your opinions, drop your conversations, address some of your questions with a targeted panelists, whether you want to ask a prof, whether you want to ask Daktari, whether you want to ask Mustafa. Kindly feel free, whether you want to ask Alpha, feel free to put out your questions and we shall be answering here. I see Remington in the chat box saying media can also be used to pressurize the government to support this initiative of ending GBV by highlighting the affected groups in the society and its impact to the economy of the country. These are some of the opinions that are coming in our chat box, that media can be used for lobbying purposes. Maybe you could take us through the lobbying process and how we can use media to lobby for certain situations and issues in the society. Mustafa, back to you before I go back to the rest of the panelists.
Absolutely. So the media is beyond being a tool for education and information, it's also a powerful tool for accountability, right? The media does have a watchdog role, and that is often it has the responsibility to hold duty bearers accountable. And the media, in Kenya, across Africa, have played this role, have played this role in a really great way when it comes to pushing for accountability and holding leaders accountable. There are endless examples across the continent where the media, the media step up and take these issues to people in power, to challenge them, to own up to their responsibilities. So that's one of the role that the media plays. And because it's human rights, often why it's important to speak about the accountability element is the governments have duties and responsibilities. Most of this human rights principles we're speaking about are all, some of them are enshrined in our national constitutions. We've legislated them, which basically means governments do have a duty to actually meet their responsibilities. But there are also international human rights treaties and instruments, on gender equality, on, we talk about the Maputo Protocol, for instance, in the African context, and a lot of African governments have signed up, have signed up to the Maputo Protocol and several other human rights instruments and treaties. So when the government fails to meet their commitment to protect, to defend human rights, then the media will ask the government these questions. And one of the work that we do at JHR as well is we have what we call rights-based media reporting. So we also train journalists to understand the different human rights instruments and how that also aligns with government responsibilities and their role as journalists to hold governments accountable when they fail to uphold these human rights instruments. So the media does have a great role, and I'm sure you've seen in different reporting, we've worked with journalists across the country here in Kenya, and other parts of Africa, where they've exposed, they've reported the practice of FGM, female genital mutilation, for instance, and question the government's role in ensuring that they hold perpetrators accountable. We've done stories when it comes to women's representation in leadership or political positions, where the media we work with, for instance, will do stories or reports or features that highlight the disparities in women's representation, because that's a gender inequality issue, and then challenge, and then challenge the states or the duty bearers, to own up and uphold their duties when it comes to protecting and upholding these human rights. So yes, the media does have an important role, and I think the goal is for the different practitioners in civil society and community-based organization is to find a way to work with the media, because often we tend to see the media as the other, or the media tend to see civil society as the other. But that's not the case, because the media is part of civil society, right? They just play different roles. So how do we then leverage? How do we leverage this? How do we leverage the media's role? How do we, the influence of the media as civil society, as anti-FGM campaigners, how do we leverage the media to push for more accountability, to push for more education, to push for more information so our people know? Because often some of the some of the crimes, I will call them, some of these human rights violations are born out of ignorance.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mustafa, for that. It has brought in a very interesting question. How then do we collaboratively work as different sectors, from education to civil societies, to media? How can we leverage that to push the aspect of positive masculinity, sow the seeds of positive masculinity? In the next few minutes, I'm going to be having open conversations such that anyone who has a question can feel free to ask away. Please you could raise your hands, you could open your mic and just say, hey, I have a question in the next 2 minutes. We are short of time, probably in the next 20 minutes we'll be closing. But before we do, interesting takeaways from this conversation, I would want to start from Dr. Chisang, who said, if you choose not to consider men, then you may be building barriers when it comes to pushing for gender equality, because when we engage everyone, we are building trust between men and women, and we are building social cohesion. That is one of the most interesting takeaways I have taken away. If you also have takeaways, kindly drop them in the chat box. We will be reviewing them. Another thing is to understand the power dynamics. There's so many aspects of power. There's charisma, there's the aspect of informational power. There's just power because different types of powers. How do you understand them? How do they work within certain settings and communities? When we are working as media, as CSOs, do we have the data to back up what we're doing? I see Faith Nashipai has raised her hand. In the next 1 minute, I'm going to be passing the baton to you. Thank you so much. Coming to Alpha, we've seen interesting positive parenting, or rather interesting ways to engage education, comprehensive gender equality education through positive parenting, and having ways to talk to parents and children such that we can sow the seeds of positive masculinity. Thank you so much for that. And we also have the aspect of media coming in, teaching or being mindset shapers, and also calling for accountability. Those are some of the key takeaways that we have gotten. I don't know what your key takeaway is. If you have them, drop them in the chat box. For now, I'm going to pass the baton to Faith Nashipai for an insight or two. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for inviting us to this great platform. My name is Faith Nashipai. I am from Thriving Communities Africa, and I am also the chairperson for male engagement and inclusion under the gender sector. And I like what I am hearing about engaging men for positive masculinity, because for a long time I've been asking, yes, we are saying that we need to galvanize positive masculinity, but how many men in the community can actually be able to define positive masculinity? We need to start from there, and our media needs to start from there and really break down some of these big words so that men can understand. And this goes to say that the kind of platform that they have is very huge, but they are underutilizing this platform. If we are to talk about positive masculinity, if we are to talk about male engagement, if we are to harness the value that men have towards gender equality, then we have to also look at what is this about them. Because every other time we look at media is, do I say dogmatizing men? And it is very harsh on men, the way media, and actually, unfortunately, it is men who are participating in creating a very bad image about themselves. So if we can have the same men showing different cases that, yes, some of these things happen, but we also have very good men doing X, Y, Z. And we are having also men who are standing for gender equality. Then, if they can be able to highlight all these issues, we are going to start having a balanced conversations, and people will start seeing men in a different light. Otherwise, we need to change the narrative of the populace regarding how we view men and boys. The next thing about this is about who are you engaging on matters to do with male engagement and inclusion, even as you do media work. Because every time you see people talking about male engagement and they're not engaging men, they're not engaging we actors who are in the environment or in the space of male engagement or men and boys work, then you miss out on the realities of what is happening on the ground. And you also miss out on getting the expert voices of the right people to inform your discussions. So for media, I would say, work with the right people and also highlight and sanitize the name and the image that we have given men in this country. It is so wrong. Yes, they are not doing very well. When it comes to statistics on GBV and femicide, fine, they're not doing very well. But that doesn't mean that men are also not going through GBV. It doesn't mean that men are also not having sexual reproductive health rights that they need to be informed about. It doesn't mean that the boys are well informed about their sexuality. Unfortunately, we are not seeing media cover some of these things, and we are not seeing them do write-ups around the sexual sexual reproductive health rights of men and boys. We need more information that is informative than more information that is bashing men and boys in the country. Thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Faith, for that great insight. Mustafa, I think there are a lot of notes to take back to journalists for human rights. These ways, how do we frame, how do we put out men in this conversation? How do they come out? I can see the comment section also, or rather the chat box is also having very interesting aspects on men. I see Michelle Awiti say some people have lost trust in the media and this needs to be restored fast. I believe it will make it easier to champion for these issues in the community and make a great impact on ending the triple threat in our country. So media has to probably sanitize the image that they have. I don't know about that. Mustafa, maybe you're going to come in and chime in on that as well. I can also see Remington coming back and saying we can also use a gender mainstreaming approach. Maybe Remington, I could invite you to probably break that down for us and tell us what is this gender mainstreaming approach, such that as we move forward, I'm going to be giving our panelists 2 minutes at least to give us their ending remarks in the next few. So for anyone, Remington, I'm just inviting you to break it down for us, or rather I could have Mustafa or anyone else who would rather want to understand gender mainstreaming approach, what exactly it means. You're welcome.
Should I go? I mean, I
Yes.
think there are a couple of issues that have been raised there, speaking about media, and one of them is about distrust that some communities already have on media. I can acknowledge that. I think we should also sometimes just be careful, because when we say media, we just have the tendency to generalize and lump every all the media practitioners, all the media outlets into one box and paints them all with the same brush. So we should be a bit cautious about that, because I do know that there are still a lot of decent journalists and decent informed media outlets out there that are quite responsible about the work they do, and they often make quite enormous effort to be inclusive, but again, yes, those claims about distrust for the media, these are also legitimate concerns, because the way some media outlets have also conducted themselves. So my suggestion to that is also, I think I mentioned this earlier, is for people in this space to identify, and there are a lot of media outlets out here, newspapers, radio stations, but to identify those that are doing responsible work and build a network or relationship with them. There are quite a few there, and if you if you're looking for media to work with that is responsible, that is progressive, you can reach out to Journalists for Human Rights, for instance, can reach out to me, and I see I have a colleague here, Bernard Ogoy, who has very good network with the media, and he's been working quite closely with journalists across Kenya, for instance. Bernard would be a good contact to have when it comes to working with the media or identifying synergies with which media house do you align with and which one do you want to work with. But I do agree again that the media does have an important role to play, but sadly, often the media sometimes, for some of the media outlets or journalists, do fall short when it comes to performing their duties. And there's a lot of work to be done to get this journalist up to par to their responsibilities. A solution I would suggest here, and one that we've been working with the different journalists we work with, is like what Faith said, that there has been a lot of bashing, and that does not help. Because what that does is, and you've seen the gender wars, there are a lot of gender wars, and men are also becoming more, what's the word to use, quite combative. When you want to speak about women's rights or girls' rights, you say, oh, what about the boy child? Right? So we don't want to create a society like that. When we instead of us sitting down, engaging, learning, and get transformative dialogues about how to make the lives of everyone better, we're engaging in combative gender wars. To say, oh, what about, you talk about the boy, the girl, or women's rights, so what about the boy? But if we want to speak about this, we will go to the data, because the data is quite clear to show that when it comes to gender-based violence, for instance, women suffer more gender-based violence, physical violence, than men. That doesn't mean men don't experience physical violence. Today is a big day in Kenya, where women and allies and feminists went out to protest because of femicide, which is a deliberate killing of women due to their gender. Does that mean men are not being killed? No, yes, men are being killed too. But what are the numbers saying? The numbers show that more women are being killed. So how do we get the media to also understand those nuances when reporting these issues? It's about the nuances, about understanding the context and understanding how to report on these issues without pushing one group in the corner and making them feel like they don't matter. We talk about inclusivity. The media does have a role to include everyone's voice. So, and one way we could do this to amplify is sometimes for us is to amplify initiatives that, for instance, have been done by men, like the End FGM initiative. It's an important initiative where men are coming together to say, men End FGM, to say, men do have a role to also combat and FGM. Such initiatives must be amplified by the media, because amplification of these initiatives or other good initiatives, they have the power of positive reinforcement, right? Because when we tell the stories that there are men who are doing this work, when we tell the story there are good men, that will also, what's the word? Inspire other men somewhere to say, oh, there are men in Kajiado that are doing this work. We should also start to do similar work like that. But if we only continue to do the bashing, if we only continue to write about the negatives, and to be honest, the negative overweighs the positive when it comes to this. But that doesn't mean we can't also talk about the positive things that are happening. That's some of the work that we try to do at JHR, getting journalists to understand that we know bad news sell, we know negativity, it sells, it's emotional, it's emotive, it's sensational. But also sometimes we want to tell the other side of the story, because it has the power to inspire other people to do good.
All right. Thank you so much, Mustafa, for that breakdown. The conversation is getting interesting. I think we are almost 4 minutes for us to end. However, I'm just going to add 10 minutes such that we can wrap it up very nicely. Dr. Chesang is actually commenting on the question we had put out on the multi-sectoral approach. How do we then work together from education to CSOs to media? How do we work together? I don't know whether I would give you the floor to talk about it, just to reiterate what you have in the comment, or should I go on with it? And then after which we go back to Professor and Alpha, then we say it's a good night.
I would suggest you just go on because I did that to save on time.
All right, thank you. Okay, so she says, I would like to comment on the section on multi-sectoral approach. This is important because it promotes synergy and coordination of efforts to address GBV and facilitates resource mobilization, both technical and financial, and cross-learning. We can do this by sharing learning, using data for public good, joint resource mobilization, planning and implementation of interventions, and having coordination mechanism for those working in the same geographies or communities. Thank you so much. Synergies is what we're talking about here. Thank you so much, Dr. Chesang. Maybe for these few minutes, 2 minutes each, if there's no any other question or any other input from our dear listeners, I would love to give it to Prof. Ndavi to just take us through your final comments in this particular positive masculinity as the new concept. Maybe now it makes more sense. Prof,
yes.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. So for me, and I have two matters here. One is just to make my comment, and then there will be a request to Kamara. Yes, so we need evidence. I mean, that's a given. That we do need to understand, the scope, the nature of positive masculinity. Yes, in fact, do we understand it? Is it something, if we are talking with our communities where we work, it resonates with the communities? So we need that data. But again, once we have that data, we need to generate a safe space for men, boys, women, girls to reflect and recognize on their individual and also share the role in promoting positive masculinity. And all we are saying is we want that finally we have equality and respect of human rights. Now, I want to briefly just talk about the social ecological model that I have in mind, where we begin, even at the household, I even go deeper in the house and go to what I call the nuptial level between the man and the woman. And I like what Kamara elaborated eloquently on, the man and the woman. First, at that level, that's a space we need to begin addressing. What is it that goes on between those two? Because whatever happens, and they brought it out, comes out in the next space. That is the family, the household, where the children are. If they are not speaking with each other, with respect, respecting each other, giving each other confidence, a man giving his wife confidence, you can ask, you can do this, you can access the household income, the family income for your own, please. And he used a very good concept, positive mentoring of the children. And then we move from the household, we go to the community. In the community, yes, we have the communities, but we have also other structure, the schools. What is happening at home and the message, the information passed in the homes at household level should not be at conflict with what the teachers are saying. What does that mean? It means the home and the schools should work together to nurture. And I like what, again, Kamara said. Yes, all these environments, all these spaces should be utilized to promote positive masculinity. And we move from there, we move now to where the issue of formal authority is exercised. At the workplace, in parliament, in schools, the managers. Someone brought up something. What percentage of our legislation is actually the women in Kenya? And yet, the Constitution gave us a benchmark and just said no more than 2/3 of one gender. Is that what is happening? Isn't that a violation of human rights? Are women not? Haven't we posed a barrier to women to achieve their own right? Look at this. So at that space, you can see already. So we move there, and therefore we go on and talk about legislation and the respect for that legislation, and use the media to hold the government to account for violating some of these. But we don't want to look at it as violating. We want to see government as promoting the achievement of these rights. For me, that's how I look at it. And from legislation, then we move now to policies to make, to make sure that the pieces of legislation that come from parliament are implemented through policies and programs. Programs by the private sector, NGOs, CSO, CBOs, programs by the government. In Kenya, we have the national and the county. We need to see that happening. That's what I would say. Now, my request to Kamara, I have 4 people in Senegal, in Sierra Leone, Dr. Fila Kamara, Dr. David Jallo, Dr. Faustine. These are gynecological obstetricians we have trained. One of those, David Jallo, did a study on the effect of female genital mutilation on pregnancy outcomes. I am hoping, we agreed when he gets back to Sierra Leone, he will share the findings of the study. The study was in Sierra Leone, but he was our student here at the University of Nairobi. And then I have made sure Dr. David Jallo, who is a Sierra Leonean, met Dr. Dan Okoro. He's a very senior with the UNFPA in Sierra Leone. Use those for financial and technical, and then link what you are doing, that is journalism and the government, the CSOs, to further this agenda on positive masculinity. Thank you, Kamara. Fila Kamara was my student. So was Faustine, so was David Jallo. If I come to Sierra Leone, I will not be very lonely.
Thank you so much, Prof, for those closing remarks. Evidence is very, very important. We need evidence. From there, we can build on other things. I'm going to pass the baton to Alpha as we have our 2 minutes of closing. And before we do, there's one comment I would love to read, then pass it to Alpha. I see Cosmos saying, it's a pleasure joining. I am Cosmos from Undugu self-help group in Kuria, Migori County. Men and boys are a pillar. We need to intensify one-on-one with men and boys on prevention. Men have more power that needs to be shared out. Media is powerful, but trust levels have dropped. If media reports responsibly, it can do more good than harm. Thank you so much, Cosmos, for that insight. I'm going to pass the baton to Alpha. Alpha, kindly, your 2 minutes. We are on strict timing right now. 2 minutes of your closing remarks. I'm not sure whether Alpha is getting me, but as we wait for him, I think something has just happened. I'm going to pass the closing remark to, he's here. Thank you so much. Alpha, you can take it away with your closing remarks. Then we will move to Mustafa and finally Dr. Chesang.
All right. Thank you very much. For my closing remarks has to be in a very snappy way. that positive masculinity is about people committing to gender equality and women's empowerment. And in doing this, it needs everybody on board because irrespective of where you are, in your home, in your workspace, at your household, you can implement what we call positive masculinity. And we want to see a society where violence is prevented. It is a happier and healthier society. When violence is prevented, that society stands to be healthier and happier. Thank you very much, and we hope and aspiring for a society where women and girls are free from all forms of violence at society level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alpha, for keeping your word. You've kept it short and sweet. Thank you so much for that closing remark. I don't know whether Mustafa is in with us for his closing remarks. 2 minutes. We follow Alpha's example at this particular moment, and then we go to Dr. Thank you. Closing remarks.
Thank you very much. So my closing remarks will just be about collaborations and partnerships. It's quite important for us to identify different partners. This is the work that no one can do alone. We do need to work across programs. We do need to work across organizations, identify media and journalists that are interested in reporting on gender and equality issues, and then contact those media institutions to work with them. We are happy to, at Journalists for Human Rights, we are happy to collaborate and work with you. And I saw my colleague Bernard share a contact in the chat. Please feel free to copy that contact and reach out to us. Have a great evening or a great afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. That is absolutely brilliant. Collaborations is the call. Let's work together to promote human rights and gender equality as well. Dr. Chasang, welcome for your closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah,
On to you.
okay. Thank you very much. I think I've learned a lot today. But some of the benefits for the men would include economic empowerment, because they now get multiple sources of income. It also helps address mental health issues because of the society expectations of men, and also addressing GBV perpetrated against men. And eventually we get better societies, including having better health and quality of life for men if you let women come in and step in for some work. Otherwise, thank you very much. This has been a very nice experience. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so, so much for making time and joining us, especially to our panelists who've shared absolutely wonderful insights, to the great audience that has been chiming in from time to time in the chat box, having conversations one-on-one. It's absolutely interesting. Thank you so much for making time. We're going to make sure that next year we plan more of this and have more of these conversations. So gear up for next year, 2025. Webinars from Men and FGM are going to be a thing. But thank you so much to the great audience. Have a lovely evening, morning, wherever you're tuning in from. I hope you get to have a wonderful, wonderful time. Thank you so much and have a blessed time.
Ciao, ciao.